Hello, everyone, and welcome. We'll give it just another minute here while attendees continue to join. All right. Thank you for tuning in today for how to govern business logic everywhere using Tableau and dbt. Over the next 30 minutes, we're going to dive into some strategies and tools that can help you navigate one of the most pressing challenges in data today, balancing self-service analytics with effective governance. I'm Maren Sakri, VP of Marketing for Euno, and I'll be your host today. We'll save some time for questions at the end, so please feel free to drop those into the chat throughout the conversation, and we'll pull those up at the end. Before we jump in, let me introduce our panelists. Mark Nelson, former president and CEO of Tableau, and currently a venture partner at Madrona. With over 30 years of experience building software from databases to middleware to applications, Mark is passionate about the ability for data and technology to improve the world. He believes that great software is a reflection of the culture of the organizations that build it. Thanks for joining us today, Mark.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited for the conversation.
Next, we have Eyal Firstenberg, a self-proclaimed data geek and the CTO and co-founder of Euno.ai. Eyal also served as the vice president of research and engineering at Lightcyber, not Saber, later acquired by Palo Alto Networks. He loves solving the toughest data and analytics challenges. He has dedicated his career to addressing the core issues every data team faces, particularly in balancing freedom with governance. Which brings us to our topic today, so let's jump in. What are the most significant challenges that data teams and analytics engineers face in today's data landscape, particularly concerning business logic, trust, collaboration, and self-serve analytics? Mark, I'd love for you to kick us off.
Yeah, I'm happy to dive in here, right? So what we're facing today is I think the desire and the goodness of self-service analytics has been made very clear for people. People want to be able to enable business users to really be able to answer their own questions and dig deeply. And we have all the tools to do so. We have amazing BI tools, of which I have a slightly biased opinion, but I think Tableau is the best for exploring data. We have the modern data stack and some amazing cloud data stores out there. We have DBT, right, which has really become the standard for transforming and modeling data with code, essentially. But customers you struggle on how to make this really work, especially at scale, because there's this tension, right? Like, how do you actually, create governed data models in a timely fashion when the reality is it's the business users and the business analysts who really understand what that should look like. And yet it's a centralized data team that is usually tasked with the creation, maintenance, and governance of these models. So how do you find the right balance between those two? How do you enable that? Because the biggest problem every time from the Tableau point that we would talk to customers, it wasn't the active analysis anymore that was the biggest blocker. It was, how do I find data? How do I trust data? How do I not end up with sprawl of dashboards? How do I not end up with sprawl of data models? Like, how do I actually trust that when I'm looking at data from two different analysts that I'm using the same set of models and procedures to get there?
Eyal, what do you have to add there?
Well, following Mark, I think really he's spot on. The key is really finding that sweet spot between empowering business users and maintaining that consistency and data integrity. That's what the central data team is tasked with. And that's easy when the team is small, and as Mark said, as the teams scale, it's just become increasingly harder. And it's just the reality that business concepts and business logic and business ideas and business notions are not created by the central data team. They're created by the functional teams, and that's always going to be the case. And data leaders understand that and appreciate that, and that just makes it that's a reality, but that just makes it all the harder because every push toward increasing consistency, toward codifying and making sure that the data is trustworthy and maintaining integrity, every such push involved a collaboration challenge, really pulling that business logic, that new business logic that was created by functional teams into central governance. One example that comes to mind, we're working with a fintech company. It's a perfect example, and they're grappling with prices data there, and the analysts. They're very involved, they're very engaged, and what they describe to us is that specific team keeps coming up with new business ideas, with new notions, new taxonomy for the business, and they do want to make those ideas, that taxonomy, available for the rest of the company. That means pulling it out into the central team's governance, but it is a challenge because they're always playing catch up. So that's kind of a perfect example of that.
Yeah, and some of the traditional solutions here, like, I mean, so the natural tendency is to swing one way far or the other, right? To have very strong governance and frustrate your analysts, or to let your analysts run free and worry about governance later. No, neither of those approaches work. Like, you need that balance. And some of the tools that have traditionally been provided here to try to find that balance, like traditional data catalogs, aren't great, not because they aren't great tools, but because they live outside the flow. Like, they complicate that natural flow between, an analyst who wants to be working with data, a data team that wants to be creating. Like, it's just a third wheel and a third experience that forces you out of kind of what you want to do there. And so again, the key is finding that balance between them, and that really requires that people on both sides, on the analyst side and on the data team side, are able to work naturally and integrate with each other.
Yeah, it's clear that analytics engineers are deeply invested in the challenges they face with data management and that collaboration piece. I hear it, I see it consistently in conversations that we're having with data teams. On their LinkedIn profiles are very vocal about it. It's evident that both DBT and Tableau play critical roles in addressing these issues within the ecosystem. Mark, given your close connection to the space, could you elaborate a little bit on what specifically the key strengths of DBT and Tableau are individually?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, let me start to one near and dear to my heart, right, which is Tableau, right? Like, Tableau is kind of the gold standard in data exploration and data analytics, right? Like, from the beginning, the founders, the mission was to help people see and understand data, and they've created this amazing capability that you see in the passion of the users. Like, I've never experienced another product that has such a passionate user community than Tableau. And that is because of what it enables the users to do. It truly gives them a new superpower and ability to see and understand data. Likewise, DBT has exploded on the scene, really in just the last few years, and has become the standard for how you transform data and how you create data models, right? It's been, because it's open source, because it really got that traction so quickly, and it allows you to do this as code, right? Like, it allows you to do the right governance things. You can have a CI/CD pipeline around it. You can follow very traditional development methodologies around your data models and your data transformation, which is super, super powerful. So you can get things like version control, documentation, testing, all really built into your flow of your data pipeline and your product, all of that. And again, combine all of that with the explosion of data stores like Snowflake, like Databricks, like Redshift. Now you've got this magic sauce where it's easy to store data, it's easy to transform data, it's easy to analyze data, because of the power of things like DBT and Tableau have brought to bear. Now the trick is, how do you get that all work together well?
Which I think that was a great breakdown. And I actually went to the Tableau conference this year for my first time. So, it was very cult-like following. I mean, people love the Viz. So it was great to see that, especially coming from my MarTech background. I'm used to the HubSpots of the world, and it reminded me of that. So I wanted to dig into another topic along those lines. Call it the Steve Urkel of the modern data stack, the semantic layer. Eyal, could you start by explaining how does the integration, including the semantic layer, address the common pain points faced by analytics engineers and improve data model management and governance?
Sure. So So really, DBT helps us maintain that transformation layer and create a helpful mark layer in the other side of the pipeline. So in a good transformation layer, in a properly maintained DBT, really the tables that are the output, the tables that are on the mark layer, the tables that are used by the BI layer, they capture the business taxonomy. So you'll have a table to capture the concept of the product. You'll have a table to capture the concept of a transaction. So that eliminates a lot of errors in how do I take the raw data, the machine generated data, and kind of align that or reshape it into my day-to-day business concepts. And that solves that part, but it still falls short of capturing the entirety of the business, the entirety of the business concepts. A good example of that is marginal profit, right? So I do have my transactional table. It's on my Snowflake or my BigQuery, and I no longer make mistakes in how does the business define transaction, but how does it define marginal profit of transaction X? And this is where a semantic layer comes into play, right? A semantic layer allows the central data team to capture more of the business ontology, of the business concept, of the ideas. So they're not locked in anyone's head. They're no longer tribal knowledge. They're properly codified, and then everybody that uses them use the same idea. Everything that's going to be locked in anyone's head, you're bound to wind up with 20 different definitions and 20 different dashboards that display those 20 different definitions, and it's just going to happen that you're going to find out about that inconsistency in the least convenient time. It's just the reality of it. So a perfect semantic layer in a perfect world, it addresses future use cases by codifying not only the taxonomy, but also the metrics and the KPIs and all these other business notions. They eliminate as much of the tribal knowledge as possible. So every analyst and every functional team, when they approach the concept of the marginal profit, they use the exact same definition and not just the taxonomy. And a perfect semantic layer allows the central data team to respond quickly. And the business evolves. There are new ideas, new notions keep popping up in the functional team. So you want to be able to really quickly pull them and add them to the semantic layer as appropriate. And you really want to have that ontology, that semantic layer, that metrics codification happen really outside of Tableau. So more applications can actually make use of them. For example, data scientists, or if you're doing some kind of an automation, you want to have that automation be able to leverage those same ideas and those same concepts.
So the semantic layer is essential for aligning those central and functional teams, but it really is just one piece of the puzzle, right? You truly have to overcome the challenges. DBT and Tableau still need to work in harmony together. So why is the integration between DBT and Tableau so crucial for data teams? Mark, would love to kind of hear your POV on this. What are the common pain points that analytic engineers face when using them separately?
Yeah, I mean, I think with Eyal's great teeing up of what a semantic layer is, like this is where the two acts of analysis and data model governance come together, right? Like you need those two things to work together to really get this picture of having consistent values, consistent answers coming out of your acts of analytics. So it's critical that those two things work together. But the reality is, again, they're targeted for two different user bases, right? You've got data and analytics engineers who are responsible for building these models. And then you've got analysts who are responsible, ideally for using those models, but they're tasked with actually coming up with answers and answering questions. And they want that flexibility of not having to wait. And they need to be able to play with this, right? Because as Eyal said, this evolves, right? Like no semantic model is frozen in time, and the analysts are the ones who have the business knowledge and have the need and the ability to craft and change those things as they're answering questions, as they're exploring data, seeing answers that no longer make sense and need to evolve that. So again, you need to strike this balance of how do you get the two teams who have these two different tools in Tableau and DBT working together to really, have this virtuous cycle, right? Where analysts are continually pushing the boundary, looking at new problems, coming up with what needs to evolve, and yet not going rogue, not just creating a derived version of a data model and creating a new data model that only is used by them. And and as Eyal said, you can't end up with this in your display tool, because then it's a model that's only used for BI, right? And as much as I love BI, that's not the only thing you want to do with data, right? Like there's so many uses for these data models, and you want them to be consistent. So the real tension here is, the classic tension with governance versus self-service, and how do you get that to work? How do you get that to work in a natural fashion so that people can still continue to use Tableau for the analysts, which is again the tool that they want to use, and DBT, which is the tool that analytics and data engineers should be using on the other side. How do you allow them to continue to work in the tools that they know and love, and yet have that tight coordination between them?
Eyal, what have you seen similar to that in kind of real life scenarios with some of the teams that you've been working with?
Yeah, maybe I can share concrete examples. So we're working with a lot of teams. Like we've been talking to hundreds of teams right now, probably, and you really see that the central team acknowledges the fact that it's dynamic. That you do want, as Mark said, you do want your analysts to push the boundaries and come up with new ideas. That's the whole point. But then they struggle to catch up with the sprawling business logic. So, for example, in the case of Tableau and DBT, which is a very common case, you will see analysts creating their own custom SQL statements in their Tableau data source. And these can be very long and sprawling SQL statement. And on the one hand, great, we have this elaborate thing, and we came up with this new business idea that we can work off of. Maybe it's a very elaborate prediction that's very useful for us. But now we have this sprawling SQL statement. Like, how do we bring it into the fold? Like, is it a new idea? Is it just an enrichment of existing ideas? For the central team that's coming into it after the fact, it's just very challenging. It's a collaboration issue first and foremost. Understanding what are we trying, what is that sprawling SQL statement trying to capture? Now, imagine that multiplied by all the data analysts you have, right? A data analyst in a normal team, the functional teams, the data analysts in the functional team will outnumber the central team 4-to-1, 5-to-1, 10-to-1 possibly. So that's a constant catch up, a very frustrating version of a catch up.
So we've got about 10 minutes left, and I do want to touch on Euno. So I'd like to ask Mark. So we actually joined Euno around the same time. Your interest was a pretty good leading indicator for me for obvious reasons. So how did you first find out about Euno, and what sets it apart from other data model management tools?
Yeah. So as we talked about, this is a problem that we thought about a lot. This problem of self-service governance is something we thought a lot about at Tableau. We spent a lot of time helping people understand that they needed to find this balance. And we were always pushing it just from one side, because with Tableau, this is a core belief of ours, but we gave all the rope to hang yourself by the use of Tableau. And so I found just through posts that Sarah had posted on LinkedIn. And just talking about her notion of what a governance should look like. And I was very intrigued. And so I reached out. This was pre-launch, before had a name, and reached out to talk just to hear what it was that she and Eyal were building. And I loved it. Like, I love the pitch, because the key difference is it allows you to find this balance in self-governance, while allowing everyone to work in the tools that they already work in, right? It allows the analysts to stay in Tableau and their favorite BI tool, and it allows the data and analytics engineers to continue to work in DBT and in their managed data models, but creating this feedback loop for them to really allow that to work seamlessly, right? Like it's not getting those users out of that flow. It's keeping them in the flow, allowing them to do what they want, but giving this really done right magical feedback loop that allows them to keep it in sync and keep that balance in self-governance. So I just love that idea. I thought that was something that was so complementary again to DBT, to Tableau, to this whole notion that we had always been trying to get our users to adopt in terms of self-service analytics and self-service governance.
I really like how you've always simply put said, yes, lets analysts continue to work in the tools they want to work in, at its simplest form, right? And I love that statement. Eyal, why did decide to focus on integrating DBT with Tableau? Why was that a priority, and how does this align with your mission to support analytics and data teams?
Well, it's really very natural. Tableau is really the poster child for self-serve analytics. Really allows you to really quickly get up and running, combine governed data tables and data sets with data that you bring from outside. Really, it really empowers data analysts. And DBT, on the other hand, that's today's the de facto standard for central governance. That's how companies make their data warehouse mirror their business concepts. So it's really natural for Euno to want to tackle that specific stacks. And we have talked to teams, and we have seen teams that are really struggling to have their DBT catch up. And I like to say that the perfect semantic layer is like the other side of the rainbow. Like you're never going to get there. You can get close, you can walk, but it's really outside the reach. And in a way, there's no inherent reason for that to be the case. The business logic is already codified. It's just codified in Tableau. With the right tools, potentially you can go and without adding any extra processes, really pull the important stuff into the central governed data model. And this is what Euno is all about. It's about this collaborative governance, allowing analysts to keep enjoying that freedom and self-serve, and as Mark said, continue to work in their tool of choice, which is Tableau, and even create business logic in their tool of choice, which is Tableau. But at the same time, allow the central team to figure out, okay, so what new important business logic was created, and bring that into the fold in a collaborative manner, in a friendly manner that doesn't take away from the data analyst's freedom. Eat the cake and leave it whole, and all that.
So you've mentioned a couple times having the Euno team has had hundreds of conversations with data teams. If you had to boil it down to solving the DBT and Tableau dilemma, what are those key use cases that were top of mind to solve for?
Yeah, so there are a lot of variants, and every team is different. That's a fact. But if I really have to, the way that I bucket those answers for myself is it falls into really three buckets. For the central team, as they kind of approach the work of governing that jungle in Tableau. Mark, excuse me for that analogy. The jungle that's happening in Tableau. So first is really making sense of it, understanding, okay, which of these things that exist in my Tableau actually matter. What we see usually is that over 90% of the Tableau resources are actually no longer in use. They're one-offs, or they have been superseded by a newer version. So really understanding what needs to be governed, which business logic pieces needs to be shifted left. Taking advantage or being able to use the information about what actually is used is a crucial part of that. And then the second bucket is, okay, once I've identified that, how do I shift it left? how do I take that business logic and add that to my existing central data model, to my existing DBT, or however I codify the business logic. And then the third is, okay, once I have that in DBT, I've done the work, I've identified the important business logic, I've shifted it left. Okay, how do I make it available for my Tableau users? So the next analyst that comes along, they don't run and do the wrong thing. They actually use the governed version of these business concepts. So really, those three buckets are the main challenges that we've heard, and pretty consistent across all the teams that we've talked to.
And how does the integration, including the semantic layer, address the common pain point faced by analytics engineers and improve the data model management and governance? You talked a little bit about it, but.
Right. So Euno really helps with all these three buckets. First of all, there is the challenge of discovery, understanding what's there in that Tableau and what is important. So auto discovers all your Tableau resources, and it really the important piece is to overlay them with what actually in use and by who. That helps really cut across the noise to the pieces that the business is actually using day to day. So really focusing out of those tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of charts and dashboards, what are the few dozen that are important to my business that I should be focusing on as a central team? So that's the number one. And the second thing is, okay, so I've identified that it could potentially be a business concept that I need to shift left as a new model. It's a new abstract idea in the business, or it could be a metric that is someone defined in Tableau. Maybe it's defined in a custom SQL, maybe it's defined in a calculated field in Tableau, and automate the process of taking that. It's already codified, it's just codified in a different language, and recodifying that in DBT, transpiling the Tableau language into the DBT metric flow. So that's the second piece. And then the third piece is, okay, once I have my business concepts and my metrics defined in DBT, I can use Euno to automate the process of generating a Tableau published data source and have the analysts use that and use that for their next workbook instead of coming up with their own Tableau and data sources and recodifying everything. So they use the governed version that includes both the concepts and the metrics.
So Eyal, you kind of summed up the perfect picture. So to kind of end with one final question before we go into our Q&A, Mark, if you had to kind of summarize, what would that perfect picture be?
Yeah, that perfect picture is where you've got your central data team and your analytics team. You're working in the tools, in the flow, and being coordinated harmoniously, right? So it's analysts out there exploring, looking, answering their questions, and the new concepts, the new models that they're stumbling into as they answer these questions are seamlessly transferred to the data teams. They have visibility into them, and they can decide which one of those are common things that need to be governed, need to be centralized, versus one-off questions that, again, that can live in Tableau because that's a one-off that someone's looking at. That all of that happens, again, very harmoniously, very simply, and in the flow, so that everyone feels like they're getting to the value and speed that self-service analytics promises to businesses.
That's great. Thank you. So we have one question that came in. This actually came in when we were discussing the 3 challenges, and it was regarding shifting left and codifying that business logic, such as measures from Tableau and DBT. So the question is, in your experience, what percentage of the important business logic in Tableau can be shifted left?
Yeah, I can maybe give a high level answer, and then Al, I'd love to hear your take as what you're seeing. Like, I think it's hard to say a percentage, right? Because it's the value. Like you want to shift left the things that should be shifted left, and you should not shift left the things that shouldn't be shifted left. And I think that's going to vary a lot based on your business, based on what you're doing. So, again, I don't think the overall percentage of how many calcs did you move from Tableau into DBT is the right metric. It is, did you get 100% of what should have been centralized and should have been reused? Like that should be your goal, is getting to 100% of the useful, the common models moved over to DBT. And then what percentage of that is actual metadata from Tableau is going to vary kind of all over the place.
Anything to add, Eyal?
Yeah, I think what we see is a lot of the logic that lives inside Tableau. A lot of it, I kind of classify as presentation layer logic. So the logic that you use to maybe color code your tabular view in Tableau. So that piece of business logic are pieces that you really don't want to shift left. You want them to stay in the presentation layer. And oftentimes, by the way, that these specific business logic even cannot be codified in Tableau because it doesn't really fit a proper business ontology. Out of the other bucket, the bucket that is proper business concepts, what we see is most of it can be shifted and codified in DBT. There are no technical limitations to codifying proper entities, relationships, and metrics.
I think that's a good way to wrap up our conversation today. I think we could probably stay on and talk for another 15 easily. But I wanted to close us out here since we are at time. Thank you everyone for joining us. You can find out more on euno.ai, euno.ai. Mark, Eyal, thank you so much for joining us, and please visit our website to learn more.
Thank you.
Thank you.